It's time for Tartarian Tales 12 and for more action along the river. And this is referred to as China in the book. And I'm calling it still part of Tartarian Tales because of how many times this area was conquered back and forth. It went back so many times. This culture that they describe does not seem like your typical Chinese culture. It seems like, they may have controlled the empire, but not all the people of the land. I'm sure there was a lot of things going on that can't be summed up with a few sentences in a history book. So enjoy this next section. I think it's got some great stuff, and here's some good imagery from all over the world. And here we go, chapter 36. Of an edifice situated in the midst of the river, wherein were the 113 chapels of the kings of China, with the public granaries established for the relief of the poor. Here we go. To give an end to the matter whereof I entreat, which would be infinite if I should recount everything in particular, amongst the great number of marvelous buildings which we saw, the most remarkable to my seeming was an enclosure seated in the midst of the river of Batampina, containing some league in circuit in an island, and environed with fair hewed stone, which on the outside was about 38 foot high above the water, and on the inside, even with the ground, being encompassed with 2 rows of balusters of latten, where of the outermost were but 6 foot high for the commodity of such as would rest themselves there, and the innermost were 9 foot high, having 6 lions of silver standing upon huge bowls, which are the arms of the king of China, as I have said elsewhere. Within the enclosure of these balusters stood in goodly order 113 chapels, after the fashion of bulwarks all round, in each of which was a rich tomb of alabaster, placed with much art upon the heads of 2 silver serpents, which in regard of the many boughs wherein they were entertained seemed to be snakes, though they had the visages of women, and 3 horns on their heads, the explication whereof we could not possibly learn. In each of these chapels were 13 branched candlesticks, with 7 great lights apiece in them, so that to compute the whole, the candlesticks of these 113 chapels amount to 1,439. In the midst of a great place, environed round about with 3 rows of winding stairs and 2 ranks of idols, was a very high tower with 5 steeples diversely painted, and silver lions on the top of all. Here the Chinese told us were the bones of those 113 kings that had been transported thither from the chapel's belows, and it is the opinion of the brutish people that these bones, which they hold for great relics, do feast one another at every new moon, in regard whereof these barbarians use on that day to offer unto them a great charger, full of all kind of fowl, as also rice, beef, pork, sugar, honey, and all other sorts of victual that one can name, wherein their blindness is such as in recompense of these meats which the priests take unto themselves, they imagine that all their sins are forgiven them, by way, as it were, of a plenary indulgence. In this tower likewise we saw an exceeding rich chamber, covered on the inside all over from the top to the bottom with plates of silver. In this chamber were the statues of those 113 kings of China, all in silver, wherein each of them were the bones of each several king enclosed. Now they hold, according as they are made to believe by their priests, that these kings thus assembled together converse every night one with another, and pass away the time in sundry sports, which none is worthy to see, but certain bonzes, whom they term cabazundis, a title amongst them of the most eminent dignity, such it may be as the cardinals of Roma. To this beastly ignorance the wretches add many other blind tales, which they are assuredly persuaded are very clear and manifest truths within this great enclosure. We counted in 17 places 340 bells of cast metal, namely 20 in each place, which are all rung together on those days of the moon, wherein they say these kings do visit and feast one another. Near to this tower is in a very rich chapel, built upon 37 pillars of fair hewed stone, was the image of the goddess Amida, made of silver, having her hair of gold, and seated upon a tribunal 14 steps high, that was all overlaid with fine gold. Her face was very beautiful, and her hands were heaved up towards heaven. At her armpits hung a many of little idols not above half a finger long, filed together, whereupon demanding of the Chineses what those meant, they answered us, that after the waters of heaven had overflowed the earth, so that all mankind was drowned by the universal deluge, God, seeing that the world would be desolate and nobody to inhabit it, he sent the goddess Amida, the chief lady of honor, to his wife Nakapirao from the heaven of the moon, that she might repair the loss of drowned mankind, and that then the goddess, having set her feet on a land from which the waters were withdrawn, called Kalemthwe, which was the same island whereof I have spoken heretofore, to the strait of Nankin, where Antonio de Faria went, on land. She was changed all into gold, and in that manner standing upright with her face looking up unto heaven. She sweat out at her armpits a great number of children, namely males out of the right and females out of the left, having no other place about her body whence she might bring them forth, as other women of the world have, who have sinned, and that for a chastisement of their sin, God by the order of nature hath subjected them to a misery full of corruption and filthiness, for to shew how odious unto him the sin was that had been committed against him. The goddess Amida, having thus brought forth these creatures, which they affirm were 33,333, 2 parts of them females, and the other males, for so they say the world was to be repaired. She remained so feeble and faint with this delivery, having no body to assist her at her need, that she fell down dead in the place, for which cause the moon at that time, in memory of this death of hers, whereas she was infinitely grieved, put herself into mourning, which mourning they affirm to be those black spots we ordinarily behold in her face, occasioned indeed by the shadow of the earth, and that when there shall be so many years ran out, as the goddess Amida brought forth children, which were, as I have delivered, 33,333, then the moon will put off her mourning, and afterwards as clear as the day. With these and such like fopperies did the Chinese so turmoil us, as we could not choose but grieve to consider how much those people, which otherwise are quick of apprehension and of good understanding, are abused in matter of religion with such evident and manifest untruths. After we were come out of this great place, where we saw all these things, we went into another temple of religious votaries, very sumptuous and rich, where they told us the mother of the then reigning king, named Nahai Kamifama, did abide, but thereinto we were not permitted to enter, because we were strangers. From this place, through a street arched along, we arrived at a quay called Hichario Tapaliao, where lay a great number of vessels full of pilgrims from diverse kingdoms, which came incessantly on pilgrimage to this temple, for to gain, as they believe, plenary indulgences, which the King of China and the chams of the government do grant unto them, besides many privileges and franchises throughout the whole country, where victuals are given them abundantly and for nothing. I will not speak of many other temples or pagods which we saw in the city whilst we were at liberty, for I should never have done to make report of them all. Howbeit I may not omit some other particulars that I hold very fit to be related before I break off this discourse, whereof the first we were certain houses in several parts of the city called Lagananpur, that is to say, the school of the poor, wherein fatherless and motherless children that are found in the streets are taught to write and read, as also some trade whereby they may get their living. And of these houses or schools there are about some 500 in this city. Now if it happen that any of them, though some defect of nature, cannot learn a trade, then have they recourse to some means for to make them get their living according to each one's incommodity. As for example, if they be blind, they make them labor in turning of hand mills. If they be lame of their feet, they cause them to make laces, rib and such like manufacturers. If they be lame of their hands, then they may earn their living by carrying of burdens. But if they be lame both of feet and hands, so that nature hath wholly deprived them of means to get their living, then they shut them up in great convents, where there are a number of performs that pray for the dead, amongst whom they place them, and so they have their share of half the offerings that are made there, the priests having the other half, If they be dumb, then they are shut up in a great house, where they are maintained with the amercements that the common sort of women, as outer wives and such like, are condemned in for their scolding and fighting one another. As for old queens that are part of the trade, and such of the younger sort as by the lewd exercise thereof are become diseased with the pox or other filthy sickness, they are put into other houses, where they are very well looked into, and furnished abundantly with all things necessary, at the charge of the other women that are of the same trade, who thereunto pay a certain sum monarthly, and that not unwillingly, because they know that they shall come to be so provided for themselves by others. And for the collecting of this money there are commissioners expressly deputed in several parts of the city. There are also other houses, much like unto monasteries, where a great many of young maids that are orphans are bred up, and these houses are maintained at the charge of such women as are convicted of adultery. For, say they, it is most just that if there be one which hath lost herself by her dishonesty, there should be another that should be maintained by her virtue. Other places there are also where decayed old people are kept, at the charge of lawyers that plead unjust causes, where the parties have no right, and of judges that for favoring one more than another, and corrupted with bribes, do not execute justice as they ought to do, whereby one may see with how much order and policy these people govern all things. In the prosecution of my discourse, it will not be amiss here to deliver the marvelous order and policy which the kings of China observe in furnishing their states abundantly with provisions and victuals for the relief of the poor people, which may very well serve for an example of charity and good government to Christian kingdoms and commonwealths. Their chronicles report that a certain king, great-grandfather to him that then reigned in China, named Chafu Zarao Penagor, very much beloved of his people for his good disposition and virtues, having lost his fight by an accident of sickness, resolved to do some pious work that might be acceptable to God, to which effect he assembled his estates, where he ordained that for the relief of the poor there should be granaries established in all the towns of his kingdom for wheat and rice, that in the time of death, which many times happened, the people might have wherewithal to nourish themselves that year. And to that purpose he gave the 10th part of the duties of his kingdom by a grant under his hand, which when he came to sign accordingly with a golden stamp that he ordinarily used because he was blind, it pleased God to restore him perfectly to his sight again, which he enjoyed still as long as he lived. By this example, if it were true, it seemed that our Lord Jesus Christ would demonstrate how acceptable the charity that good men exercise towards the poor is to him, even though they be Gentiles, and without the knowledge of the true religion. Ever since there have been always a great many of granaries in this monarchy, and that to the number of 114,000. As for the order which the magistrates observe in furnishing them continually with corn, it is such as followeth. A little before reaping time, all the old corn is distributed forth to the inhabitants, as it were by way of love, and that for the term of 2 months. After this time is expired, they unto whom the old corn is lent return inasmuch new, and withal 6 in the 100 over and above for waste, to the end that this store may never fail. But when it falls out to be a dear year, in that case the corn is distributed to the people without taking any gain or interest for it, and that which is given to the poorest first, who are not able to repay what hath been lent to them, is made good out of the rents, which the countries pay to the king as an alms bestowed on them by his special grace. Touching the king's revenues, which are paid in silver picos, they are divided into 3 parts, whereof the first is for the maintenance of the king in his state, the second for the defense of the provinces, as also for the magazines and armies, and the third to be laid up and reserved in a treasury that is in this city of Peking, which the king himself may not touch unless it to be upon occasion for defense of the kingdom, and to oppose the Tartars, Cochins, and other neighboring princes, who many times make grievous war upon him. This treasure is by them called Chidampur, that is to say, the wall of the kingdom. For they say that by means of this treasure, being well employed and carefully managed, the king needs lay no impositions upon the people, so that they shall not be any ways vexed and oppressed, as it happens in other kingdoms, for want of this providence. Now by this and that I have related one may see, how in all that great monarchy the government is so excellent, the laws so exactly observed, and every one so ready and careful to put the prince's ordinances in execution, that Father Navier, having well noted it, was wont to say that if ever God would grant him the grace to return into Portugal, he would become a suitor to the king for to peruse over the rules and ordinances of those people, in the manner how they govern both in time of war and peace, adding withal that he did not think that the Romans ever ruled so wisely in all the time of their greatest prosperity, and that in matter of policy the Chinese surpassed all other nations of whom the ancients have written. So that, again, ended in a very interesting way, which I didn't expect. A very interesting praise of China that almost seems reminiscent of today. Wonder if they even had ways to tap into this and rewrite some of this, but probably not. I'm not going to go there. I do find it interesting how this writer praises China's control of the people, the punishment, the justice system, their ability to know where everyone is and make things happen. If anyone gets punished, they have ways of making it stop. And how they have even that treasure box of all the China's treasure, where basically if they have this, they're okay, like the equivalent of the nuclear football nowadays, but wonder what was in that. And it seems like all these cultures from the past, basically some force kind of took little things from each of these cultures, these customs, their different systems, the things that worked in the most conforming, ridiculous way, and then just trashed the history that was real and rewrote everything for all of us today, erasing everything that would counteract it. We have to just keep looking for little gems, the tiny crumbs of info that may exist in some of these books that are somewhere to be found. And it's great that we can peek through these, even though imagine the ones that have been destroyed. There's, oh my God, I can't even fathom it. And all the books that exist in realms that we know nothing about. We will hopefully someday find out how truly amazing this world is, was, and always has been, and needs to become again. I feel like it's coming within our lifetime. We just got to keep pushing it, change the culture a lot. It's time for a renaissance. That's the only way we'll get to that point. Bless you all.